it's definitely perfect that Miller's here
Oh no,
because
what?
because a certain game by a certain studio that you're very familiar with has recently popped up in the news. Uh,
Oh.
Perfect Dark.
Uh,
Perfect Dark popped up in the news, and yeah, well, and we can tie that into the larger issue with Xbox going on, but yeah, so the tea around Perfect Dark was there was a report from Jeff Grubb mentioned that basically development was kind of a shit show. It was it was in a rough spot, and then recently another insider came out and said that it was that's outdated, and that they're going to do a reveal for Perfect Dark next month, and that was kind of like a back and forth thing. But when I heard that, I was like, wait a minute, Miller Miller had the scoop on that like last year, and, and I'm going to take his word on that. Also, the fact that I know who's making this game, like,
well,
like,
here's the timeline. There was a bunch of development issues like very early on, and stuff was sort of popping up everywhere. Um, that was like around the time that Crystal got involved.
yeah,
Um, then I don't forget who it was, but someone came out and talked about Perfect Dark being a mess. And then I did my like Avengers is shutting down thing.
mm-hmm.
And
Classic.
I mentioned on Reset Era that Perfect Dark was definitely coming out like at least a year after Tomb Raider because development was a fucking mess. Um, and I that comes from like a few things. It's sad though because like the this industry, and I don't just mean scooping or
Right.
like or gaming news, but gaming development and just um, sort of what orbits around that. There's this sense of like be nice, like don't name names,
Mm-hmm.
like the uh, problems that surface around um, this space. They come from people. They are choices that people are making. Like there's more than just Bobby Kotick making mistakes out there and
Right.
hurting people. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of people doing bad things in this industry. Um, and so what I was working on like an Avengers postmortem for a while, and one of the focuses of that for me was going to be like the culture at Crystal Dynamics and how that contributed to Avengers and how that sort of contributed to its downfall
Yeah.
and how it continues to plague them and how it came to be. The studio is run right now by Ron Rosenberg and Scott Amos, who are like co-studio heads. They took over for Daryl Gallagher, who left and ultimately started the initiative, right?
Mm.
So when Perfect Dark was a bit of a shit show, he partnered up with his old studio, Crystal Dynamics, and the leadership structure at Crystal Dynamics is basically still there from his time. Like people just sort of went up a level. It's very much still the same studio that he left. You know what I mean? So it's not a huge transition for him to work with
Mm.
them. Um, but the problem with that is he ran oh, it's he was not a good boss.
Uh,
Um, Terrible, terrible, terrible crunch culture, like one of the worst in the industry. Um, and the studio is run very much like there's haves and have-nots. There's um the studio leadership and the people that they like, and that's totally separate from any sort of merit-based system based on like how good people are at their job, their performance. It's inside apparently it's very very arbitrary, and also it's very obvious who is and is not on leadership's good side. Like we know in the lead up to Avengers, they did a lot of like drinking and like karaoke nights and stuff, and that was
yeah.
really only for that class of like accepted people. um
So it's basically high
and
school.
it is a little clicky, yes, definitely. There was notably it's it's a cycle of problematic behavior that goes so much further than any one specific thing. One source that I spoke to at Crystal volunteered a story about expressing suicidal ideations during like the worst of the crunch leading up to Avengers, and then the response that they seemed to receive from that was like a couple days later they get to work, puppies, like they brought puppies for to comfort everyone. And it and that's sort of like their solution to those kinds of problems. Like they really don't have an issue shoving people into a meat grinder. And it's gross. It's frequently very gross. They do like raffles. So if you like, you don't have to stay, but you have to stay. And to reward you, you get these like raffle tickets. And the the prizes are like a gift card, a PlayStation controller, like, you know what I mean? Or it's like, okay, everybody's been working like 16-hour days. How do we reward them? Let's get pancakes. Like, let's do catering. Like, it never occurs to them to pull back on the crunch at all. And they do it relentlessly multiple times a year. It's a never-ending cycle with them. And they've never really been put on blast for that. It's never really like, people don't tend to last very long in Crystal if they value their desire to continue in the industry and don't want to kiss ass. But also, too, some of the people that kiss ass aren't particularly good at their jobs and then get rewarded majorly.
We know
And
people.
I know that both of you know people like that. Not even the people I'm thinking of, but that just happens so frequently at that studio. I can think of, I will say this, I can think of one person at that studio who was beloved by fans, who hustled for years to keep a starving community alive. They adored her. Not everybody, but most of them adored this person. And she got shit canned in a round of layoffs and replaced by somebody who is not good at their job, but who is famously very close with his boss. And that's really par for the course of the studio. So to hear that Perfect Dark is having trouble, a lot of that blame does tend to go to Microsoft, but people don't know like how much of a shit show Crystal is. Like during the worst crunch on Avengers, like you have to understand too, like their pay is also a little below industry standards, and they were at that time in one of the most expensive parts of California, so people couldn't afford to work at that studio and live in that area. So in addition to working like a 12-14 hour shift, you'd have an hour and a half drive to get home to to a neighborhood that you could actually afford to live in. So people weren't seeing their kids like grow up. Like it was miserable. And so usually what happens, it's been brought to me, usually what happens at Crystal Dynamics is people are sort of courted with this, like, we have this like, don't you love Tomb Raider? We're like at the forefront of like video game history. This is so historic. Like you get to contribute to something amazing that's timeless. And they are able to attract like a very high caliber of talent for that reason. But when the game actually ends up coming out, they have a huge wave of attrition. Like people leave because they get screwed out of their bonuses with performance reviews that don't make sense. The game does not usually, well, under Crystal Dynamics, meet their under Square Enix, excuse me, meet their sales expectations that were ridiculous. So they just really, like, all of those reasons that they had in their mind for why it was worth it to go through all of that, looking back like 3-4 years later, they're like, why did I do this? Like what happened? Like what have the last years of my life been? And it gets a lot of people burnt out of working in the industry at all. Like there's been big talents at Crystal that have left and just never come back to the industry.
Yeah, shout out to Andy. Like he literally looks like a new person when he left when he left Crystal Dynamics from the community manager role on Avengers and went to Capcom. He looks so happy.
I really hope I get to run into him at Summer Game Fest.
Yeah, that would be nice. Like that, I feel so happy for Eddie. Like, shout out to Capcom. I'm a Capcom creator. It's a great culture over there.
It's funny. I went and started looking 5 hours ago. Jeff Grubb. Yeah, since we're talking about it, I've heard Perfect Dark shows up at Xbox Showcase, and he was quote like replying to somebody, Nate the Hate.
I know.
Yeah, Nate Drake was the one. Okay, so like to continue the timeline, oh god, I've already forgotten who brought it up, but it got brought up again. Oh no, shortly after my story, Rebecca Valentine, who I adore at IGN, posted a story about Crystal Dynamics, and the initiative, moreover, and like some of the problems that had happened earlier in Perfect Dark's development leading up to that point. And the sentiment was it was really bad, but now it's gotten better. And that at that point I was still like pretty close with Crystal Dynamics sources.
Mhm.
That didn't really gel with what I had heard. I know some of the people that were leading the project, like from a creative standpoint,
Mhm.
and I had heard horror stories of working with them from other people. And there was like one or two anecdotes explicitly about Perfect Dark that to me don't sound like a good game make. Like I don't know. But anyways, so I'm not like a big insider or anything, you know what I mean? Like I have a couple people that I know.
Disagree.
But I mean really like it's funny that I'm on like the trust list or whatever on like the little survey that Gaming Leaks and Rumors do, because I'm not out here talking about the Switch 2 or something, you know what I mean? Like I cover a game, I by extension cover that studio, I get to talk to people and I report on that, and that's it. So with Avengers in the rearview mirror and me not really being like a Tomb Raider guy, I really haven't kept up with those people at all. So all I really have to go off of is what I had heard. And so it came up again recently, and the opinion that I had was like, I would be surprised if it ever saw the light of day. Like, I'd be surprised if it ever saw the light of day, because there was some miscellaneous stuff about Tomb Raider that I won't get into, but just general studio stuff. And so I was like, I don't know that it's ever going to happen. And then now suddenly, and at the time, Nate Drake, Nate the Hate, sort of co-signed that and was like, that's exactly what I've heard. Like, you're never going to see it. It's a shit show. Da, 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 da. And then a day or two after that, there was a reverse course. And now it's like, actually, it's not too bad. And they're planning on like a reveal kind of soon. And I don't know if you're even going to see gameplay or if it's just like a like a title screen, or I don't know, like an animated thing. I don't know.
I'll be shocked if they show gameplay.
I expected us to have seen Tomb Raider a long ass time ago. Like I don't know. It's a tough one. They rated you a 50/50 star, which is funny because it's like, what do I report on that's like so off? Like, I don't know. Whatever.
Literally nothing. It's actually,
again, I'm not out here talking about the Switch 2, you know, like
yeah.
I kind of stay in my lane.
Yeah,
But anyways,
the
yeah,
the only way I can think of that would have turned this whole project so dramatically around is if they hired B-Wags, because we know how great he is at saving games.
Crystal has had, like, Crystal is, they're really a shitty place to work. Like, they've had unadvertised layoffs in the last couple years that like never got publicized. They had a major creative lead on Avengers left to do like a Web3 thing, some scam, and then he got courted back with like a cushy unlisted job made just for him, which is like a director job, right? And I don't see how that's like a positive influence. Like almost every single person that I've ever spoken to who worked on Avengers volunteered that man's name as like a destructive influence on the development of Avengers. And again, like they went out of their, like he probably got, I mean, I don't know what he got to do it, but you know, he got like this cushy director job made just. I think he's like I can't say that because then it'll spell out who it is. But
yeah. Well,
my point is like, I don't think they're a studio that's going to make many more good games. Like I don't to say I question their leadership is an understatement. I mean, like Ron Rosenberg was the guy who just a year, I think, before he got promoted to head of studio, was the dumbass who said, "Oh, gamers are going to want to protect Lara from being raped," and that was that whole massive PR disaster around the Reboot trilogy. Like, that's the sort of behavior that gets like rewarded there. Like I just don't think they have it in them for a hit. They're really coasting on the IPs that they have touched in the last 20 years.
Yeah, that's why when I heard that the Perfect Dark stuff, I feel like my current thinking is that this feels like spin, like obviously the Embracer Group is very much invested with trying to salvage what they have, and I know there's a lot. I know Microsoft wants to have this out because it's a recognizable brand name, and this kind of feels like maybe go to the media and be like, oh, actually, you want a scoop? Actually, development on Perfect Dark is going great. Actually, we're about to show off this. So what we got right at this next showcase, it's gonna you heard those? Oh, don't listen to them. Like no, they're not reliable. No, this is the real scoop. That's outdated information. You really, the real story is that development is going really well now. They turned it all around. Like we figured it out. I think that's what this is. They're going to show a little sizzle reel, get people hype, try to get people hype, and they're going to show as little raw gameplay as possible leading up to launch, if it ever gets to that point. And it's going to come out, and it's going to be ass, and people are going to be like, "What happened to Perfect Dark?" And they're gonna be like, well, I mean, game development is hard. Things happen, who knows? It's gonna be one of I see it. I see it clearly. I see the vision.